Two more guests to go before we hand back to the UK and continue on this round the world trip with the ADHD Global Conference. This next presenter is a colleague of mine at ADHD Australia, but when she's not doing that, Rebecca is a behaviour analyst and advanced behaviour support practitioner who works closely with neurodivergent people and their families. As both a professional and a proud ADHD herself, she combines evidence-based practice with lived experience to bring fresh insight and understanding. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here and get stuck into my presentation for everyone. Okay, so I wanted to come and talk today about reinforcement and reward systems and why they may not always stick the way we expect them to when we're working with ADHDers. It's been a huge source of frustration for myself in my personal life and when I've been working with the different families and people that I support as well. So let's get into it. I wanted to start with a little bit of an introduction. So my name is Becky. I'm a board certified behaviour analyst, a certified behaviour analyst in Australia, and an advanced behaviour support practitioner, which is the role that I currently work in as a behaviour support practitioner, supporting people to improve their quality of life. Okay, let's jump into something maybe a little bit personal, but I think important to share. I have on the screen here a snippet of my school report from 24 years ago. So I just started secondary school when I got this report. English was one of my favourite topics, but unfortunately for me, when I joined secondary school, it felt like all the rules had changed. My lovely reinforcing teacher was gone. It was replaced by different teachers for every topic, each with their own discipline style. I'm sure many of you have seen reports just like this, either your own or your children's reports, or maybe you've received similar feedback at work to say things like, must improve performance, try not to be distracted, proofread, don't make errors, be more ambitious, concentrate harder, work to the deadlines. I think it's feedback that ADHDers receive all too often. And I don't think that's because we are broken in any way. I think that's just because people are not yet equipped to understand ADHD and how best to motivate our brains to get into a learning space and motivate our brains to retain the skills that we need. So hopefully today we'll go through some of those tools. First we'll go through some reasons of why that might be, and then we'll go through hopefully some tools towards the end so we can stop seeing reports like this. Okay, why isn't it switching? Sorry. Okay. So the sciencey bits, we're going to go over a little bit of background, like I said, of why motivation looks different in ADHDers. And before I jump into all of that, I just wanted to do a quick technical jargon recap, what we talk about a lot in the behaviour analysis world, and that is the word reinforcement. So when we talk about reinforcement in behaviour analysis or in psychology or in any other context really, it means to strengthen. So when we use reinforcement after a behaviour, the idea is that it strengthens that behaviour or that skill in the future. So some examples on the screen here. If I say please after requesting a cookie and my mum gives me the cookie, which is the reinforcement, I'm more likely to say please in the future. If my boss gives me a shout out, so reinforcement, after I complete a good report for him, I'm more likely to do good reports in the future or put more effort into my reports in the future. It strengthens that behaviour. What I think is important to recognise as well is that reinforcement isn't always something that's given or delivered. It's not always socially kind of mediated by another person. Sometimes it's the naturalistic things that happen in our environment. So one example would be, I go outside, the sun is beaming in my eyes, so I put on some sunglasses. They remove the sunlight, which is reinforcement. And that means I'm more likely to wear sunglasses again in the future. Okay, so now we've gone through some technical jargon. Let's jump into the ADHD twist. Reinforcement works like that, the ways that I've just described for everyone. All behaviours, all human behaviour, all skills are shaped up with reinforcement. That is a fact. But with ADHD, there are some curveballs, I guess, that are thrown at us. So ADHD, we hear all these things like inattention, low tolerance for delays, impulsivity, etc., etc. It's not just about all of these things. ADHD brains process rewards and reinforcement differently. Our motivation drops more quickly. Things like waiting can feel really impossible, and rewards that we put in place or reinforcement we put in place can lose its sparkle pretty quickly. Maybe have a think about the beautiful sticker chart that you made your child to motivate them to do their chores, and it lasted one day. Or for yourself, that gorgeous new planner that you might have bought with new fancy pens so that you could tick off your to-do list, and you swore it would keep you on track. But again, it lasted maybe a week or two before it kind of lost its charm. Also thinking about that promise that we make to ourselves sometimes, like, oh, if I, stick to my diet plan and I focus on losing weight this month, I will buy myself a new dress as a reward. And that lasts up until there's a pizza party in the office and you're taken off track. For ADHD brains, the rewards or the reinforcement systems that work really well sometimes for other people don't always land the same way for us. And that's not an excuse. That is us trying to make typical strategies fit our neurodivergent brains. So I want to introduce 3 evidence-based concepts, 3 main kind of ideas from research. I've spent a lot of time researching why the things that I learned in my behaviour analysis course, my psychology courses, didn't quite land the way I expected them to. And I sourced research from all different fields, not just psychology. And these are the 3 kind of main ones that came up, particularly in ADHD. So there's research that talks about neurochemicals, about dopamine, norepinephrine, and some other kind of neurochemicals that regulate things like the reward center in our brain. And there's this idea that potentially they don't work the way that they are supposed to, that they fade really quickly, or that they are dysregulated. And that kind of is why some of the ADHD attributes are the way that they are. Then there is this idea called the partial reinforcement extinction effect. And that sounds really tricky, but essentially all that means is with typically developing people, when reinforcement is removed after a skill is learned, they will continue to use that skill. We don't receive reinforcement for every single thing we do in life. Eventually we've learned it and we don't need rewards for that anymore, and we can keep going. But research finds that that's actually not so true in people with ADHD. And then there is weighting, or this thing called delay discounting, which is the idea that the longer we wait for something, the less valuable that reward becomes. And that, again, is particularly prevalent in ADHDers. So we'll talk about these concepts one at a time, do a bit more of a deep dive into them. So the brain stuff first. Our brains run on these little chemical messengers. We have dopamine, which is like the yay, you did it. This is the signal, the firework that goes off when you achieve something. When dopamine hits, it connects what you just did to this fun reward pleasure sensation in your brain. So then your brain will learn the connection of like, when I do this, it's good. So you'll keep doing it. In ADHD, those fireworks do still go off. So the dopamine does hit, but it fades away really quickly. This is called the fast attenuation of dopamine response. So what it essentially means is, yes, we get this big hit of dopamine, but it fades away quicker than it might do in neurotypical brains. So that means for us, in simple terms, that motivation doesn't stick around as much. Then we have norepinephrine. This is like the brain's spotlight or its go signal. This is what helps brains to stay focused and stay alert. In ADHD, that spotlight can flicker sometimes. It means that we take in all of the stimuli in the environment. It's all really important. It all rushes in at the same time because the spotlight isn't helping us focus on the thing that we're supposed to be focusing at. So this is why it's really hard to keep attention, or this is what research suggests. So when these two systems are not working, our dopamine system and our norepinephrine system are dysregulated, then the rewards and reinforcement and staying motivated and staying focused, it's all a little bit more tricky. So motivation drops, focus drifts, rewards lose their power quicker. Think back to my slide on reinforcement. So what I said back then, and I said it quite quickly, was that when we learn a skill, what's supposed to happen is once a skill has been learned or a behavior has been learned, we can fade out how often or how big the reinforcement or rewards are that are given, and the behavior should maintain. So you can see on the left there, the behavior should keep going. So for example, I teach my child how to brush their teeth. They get really great at it. Maybe I've used a sticker chart. Maybe I've just used praise. Over time, they learn how to brush their teeth and they're really good at it. And I don't need to use the sticker chart or praise them every single time they've brushed their teeth anymore. They will continue to keep maintaining that behavior and keep going. And that's the idea of the partial reinforcement extinction effect, or PRE. But research shows that that's not necessarily the case for ADHDers. The sticker chart, when not given enough, won't stick. Or if your praise kind of fades out too quickly, then the behavior will stop or slow down a lot. And it's not because ADHDers are lazy. It's not because they are unmotivated. It's because the reinforcement never really reached them strongly enough in the first place to stick. So like I said before, dopamine, when it fires, that helps us connect what just happened in the environment, in the physical world, to the pleasure system in the brain. And if that's fading away really quickly, we need more reinforcement. We need it to happen much more often for a longer period of time for that to stick so that our behavior kind of continues. If we fade it too quickly, then the reinforcement hasn't really solidified yet and the rewards reduce too quickly, and so the behavior also reduces or slows down or stops. There was some other research as well, a little bit of a plot twist, that found when reinforcement was thinned too quickly, it wasn't that the behavior just stopped. They found that ADHDers actually started engaging in different behaviors or started using different skills. The idea, or the summary, I guess, by those researchers at the time was that they thought perhaps the ADHDers are trying to regain that reinforcement that they felt was lost. So now that they're not getting reinforcement for doing the thing that they thought was right anymore, they start doing other things because then that might get them the reinforcement. Maybe they're trying to regain what it is that they feel is lost. So they feel that the reinforcement is gone, not just delayed. Then we have delayed discounting, delayed discounting. So this is an idea that's in many different fields. It's in economics, it's in psychology, behavior analysis, and it is this idea that having a smaller prize now is more valuable than waiting a long time for it. So on the slide there, you can see with delayed discounting, do I want to choose $25 now, or do I want to wait 7 days and get $50? So different people will choose different things. But in ADHDers, what has been found is that the longer the wait, the less valuable the prize feels. It feels like the reward shrinks with every minute or day that passes. So that's why revising for exams that are months away, or sticking with a sticker chart for weeks and weeks and weeks just to receive half an hour of PlayStation time, for example, or working really hard to get that big raise at work that's been promised to you 2 years down the line, feels impossible. We'd rather have the small rewards now than the big rewards later. They almost always win out. And again, it's not because ADHDers don't care about the rewards, and it's not because we're not motivated to kind of sustain our effort for a really long period of time. It really is just because our brain's fireworks haven't triggered in the same way. The connection between now and then is much more difficult to make. Research even shows that delay aversion and poor timing skills and high levels of impulsivity, so ADHDers that struggle to wait for things, ADHDers that have higher levels of impulsivity, and ADHDers that struggle with timing tasks, timing skills, all of those things are connected. So it's also about that kind of time blindness and that feeling of it's either now or never, with or now and not now in ADHDers that ADHDers experience. I did pop up some research specifically on this slide here. So Jackson and McKillop 2016 found that it is consistently elevated, delay discounting. So that means it's not just children that struggle with this issue of needing a reward now rather than having to wait for it later, or feeling like the later reward is of lesser value. It's consistent across the lifespan. It's children and it's adults. Demuri has some really great research in this area too, where she finds that there's different types of rewards have different value attached to them, especially when it's attached to time that's passed as well. So the first one here, 2012, she found that monetary rewards had a much higher delay aversion for people with ADHD than for people with autism or typically developing peers. She also found a year later that discounting in children, so ADHD, ASD, and typically developing children, occur much more steeply for transient rewards, praise, food, activities, than permanent ones. So what that means is if they had to wait for something like praise, something that goes as quickly as it comes, or food, which is consumable and is gone once it's gone, or activities like, I don't know, playing a game of soccer or, half an hour on the Xbox, those rewards, if they had to wait for them, it was a much steeper curve. It became much less valuable to them to have to wait for something that was going to be over with after a period of time anyway. Whereas if they were waiting for something that was more permanent, so things like money or toys, so permanent kind of items that stay in the physical space, then they were a little bit more kind of tolerant to waiting for those than they would be the things that are fleeting. So really interesting. 3 ideas there that contribute to why rewards and reinforcement systems don't always work as well with people with ADHD. It is really important, though, to know that one size does not fit all. So the 3 ideas that I mentioned there, and I really did gloss over them, like I they're quite deep topics of research, and they're all interconnected, I think. But what I also want to make sure that I say today is that one size does not fit all. ADHD is not one single profile. There's different types of ADHD, and obviously then there's huge variety in the humans that have it. So we all experience it potentially a little bit differently. And research has found that motivation does look different depending on the type of ADHD that somebody has and even the gender. So an example, a big study by Fernandez, Martin, and colleagues in 2025, so quite recently. They looked at delay discount, and they found that 78% of combined type ADHDers fell into a steep discounting group. So that means they really, really, really devalued having rewards given later rather than now. On the other hand, those with the inattentive type of ADHD showed a shallow or a flat curve. This means that once the reinforcement was delayed, it kind of stopped having any meaning at all. They weren't really bothered about it then. So it wasn't now, so it's not important. And they didn't kind of persist with the behavior or the skill that was expected to kind of reach that. In another study by Roche and Matovsky, they found that girls who had combined ADHD, they discounted delays much more than boys did. So they had a steeper delay. They were not willing to wait. Boys were much more willing to than girls with combined type, which I found really interesting. What does all of this mean? It means that ADHDers, or some ADHDers, need an instant reward, whereas some don't need or won't wait at all for a future reward. Some are happy to stick with it if it's meaningful enough. So essentially, it could be any of the above. It could be A, B, or C. So that makes it really difficult for us to predict how our reinforcement system is going to go if we don't know if this reward system is going to stick for this person. Because we're thinking, oh, well, I know that all ADHDers struggle with waiting, so I'm going to make sure that there's lots of consistent rewards. That's not necessarily true, because they might be able to wait for a longer period of time, depending on maybe their type or their gender, or the type of reward that is being offered as kind of reinforcement for learning a new skill. So it's difficult. I guess the answer isn't so clear cut, which makes sense because ADHD isn't so clear cut. It is a spectrum. There are lots of different varieties within it, and not all humans are the same. So we need to, instead of thinking, I need to do this every time for every ADHDer that I meet, you need to be able to have tools to problem solve when maybe a reinforcement or reward system isn't working, and decide what you're going to do to change it. So let's jump to the problem solving bits. I'm just going to have a glass of water. 1 second. Okay. The problem solving bits. Hopefully we can leave here with some tools on how to identify when something's not working so well and what we might be able to do to change it. Before I move into that, I do want to say again, like, I know I very much glossed over those 3 concepts there of why ADHDers might struggle with reinforcement and reward systems and motivation. I think the main takeaway of that point that I want you guys to have is really knowing that it is researched a lot. It is a real thing. It's not just that we're being lazy or that we're not motivated or that we don't care for reinforcement or we don't care about learning skills or doing better. We just have different brains that respond to reinforcement in a different way. So let's jump into the problem solving bits. Okay. I have got a table on the slide. You might want to take a picture of it. I do know the writing is quite small and there's a lot of it there. So if you want to take a picture of that, please feel free. They're just some problem solving prompts that I kind of developed after doing all of this research to help people. So to help teachers, to help parents, to help practitioners that I work with kind of be able to problem solve what works and what doesn't work when they are using reinforcement systems with ADHDers. Some general ideas that we should keep in mind generally for everyone is that some reward systems or reinforcement systems might need to stay in place a little longer than we would think. They do need to be frequent and they do need to be immediate, because remember we spoke about that brain difference of dopamine not quite hitting the same. We want to make sure that the child or yourself or the person that you're working with has had enough reinforcement to kind of link that behavior to reinforcement or pleasure pathway over and over and over and over again until it's really, really solidified. So you might want to just keep the reinforcement in there a bit longer than you would expect to. That's not spoiling yourself or spoiling your child or spoiling the child in your classroom or anything else. It really is just supporting how the ADHD brain works and what they need to succeed. The second general guideline is to switch things up, keep things interesting. ADHD brains really thrive on novelty. We want to keep reinforcement refreshing as much as we can. Plan how to keep your behaviors or skills alive over time. So, if you're teaching a new skill to your child, or you're trying to focus on a new skill for yourself, you're trying to focus on a new behavior or change things up, build a new habit, all of those things, you need to plan how you're going to keep that alive. And if you recognize that it's starting to fail, or that the reinforcement system you had in place is no longer working, the rewards don't seem to have any kind of benefit to the person anymore, then change it up. Figure out okay, so this isn't working, but I do think this skill is important. So I might need to go back to giving it more frequently or longer. Maybe it's because I've got an activity or praise or a transient rewards in place that's not actually going to have much value if I give this later on. But planning for it and monitoring it in some way so you can see when the reinforcement or the reward system starts to lose its sparkle and starts to dip a little bit, it will keep everyone kind of much more accountable and not forgetting about this skill and not leaving it to the wayside. Final thing to remember, as I've said, is that ADHD is not one profile. What works for one ADHDer may not work for another. And flexibility is key. And it's okay to experiment. It's okay to adapt. I'm not going to read through all of the things on the screen here. I think, like I said, take a picture and you can refer to it later. It is really just a prompt chart that will help you identify, okay, is the delay between the behavior and the reinforcement too long? Is the delay discounting at play here? And the things that you can look for are things like signs of disinterest or off-task behavior. They're doing something different than what you expected them to do, or you're doing something different than what you expected yourself to do. You might see things like reduced engagement. And if you see this and you recognize it early enough, you can then go, oh, this reinforcement system or this reward system isn't working for him anymore. It's not working for me anymore. I need to make a change. So we can use smaller reinforcement now and maybe work up to something bigger later. So that might look like, giving lots of praise in the moment and then having a chart of some sort. Like if you are going to use a sticker chart or a token chart or something along those lines, instead of having to be, we're going to work through 20 different stickers before you get your prize of going to the zoo with your family for the day, you might want to have smaller prizes at every 4th or 5th star. So maybe they get some praise, maybe they get a little bit of pocket money, maybe they get a voucher towards something that they can spend at the zoo at the weekend. And then when they hit that final 20, then the big prize is there. I think, making sure that we're kind of meeting the need of the person by bringing our reinforcement systems in sooner and making sure that they are more frequent is a good strategy generally anyway. And then there's some other questions on there as well. So is the learner making inconsistent choices even after the skill has been mastered? You might see things like confused or erratic responding or emergence of some tricky behaviors that you were trying to maybe replace. Then you might want to do things like anchor the reinforcement in a way that makes it very salient or very obvious to the person. So have cues or prompts around in the environment that show, remember, if we do this thing, we get this cool reward or this cool reinforcement prize. If all else fails, embed the reinforcement in the task that you're doing as much as possible. make the task itself really fun, make the task itself reinforcing, and that will definitely help to maintain any new skills or any behaviors that you teach. Okay, so let's come full circle. Remember the school report from the beginning? That really was most of my reports. That was definitely my story as a child, as a teenager growing up. I found that report in a box at my grandma's house, and literally every single one read exactly like that. But when I look back, it's not that I was unmotivated. It's not that I didn't apply myself or that I was lazy or didn't care. I actually really loved learning, enough to go to university twice. I just processed reinforcement differently. My motivation worked on different rules to everyone else's. I needed reinforcement systems that fit my brain and kept me going in a way that worked for me. So what looked like inconsistency or lack of effort was actually just a reflection of how my ADHD brain was wired. Once we can understand that, we can stop blaming the person and start adjusting the environment. So all those things I spoke about, delay discounting, the partial reinforcement extinction effect, the brain differences that we have with dopamine and norepinephrine, they're real. They are real, and they need monitoring, and we need to adapt the way that we provide reinforcements and rewards and harness motivation so that we can overcome some of those differences. Okay, and that is it. Today was mostly a brief information session, some research to help you reframe why rewards and reinforcement don't always land the way that you might expect them to. I want to say it's not that behavior science or psychology or any of these things are wrong or are broken. It's just that it needs to be applied a little bit differently or with a bit more systematic kind of support than for ADHDers than it might do for typically developing people. I also want to say that everyone's journey looks a little bit different, and we learn just as much from lived experience as we do from research. And I would really love to hear your journey or your ideas or some great reinforcement tricks and hacks that you've used. Or even if you have any questions, my email and my LinkedIn is there on the page, and you are welcome to reach out to me. Okay, thank you.
Beck, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I love the line, you love learning so much that you went to university twice. Yeah, no, I get it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Listen, thank you for your presentation today. We have just passed the 24-hour mark since this conference started back in the UK yesterday. And it continues after our next guest, who is our last guest within the Australian feed today. I'll be back on the other side. But I'd just like to welcome back Andrew Thompson, and our next guest, Errol Benvie.